Hi, Long Service Mining, aka Dark Creek. I am doing this video as like a prep before I start uploading more like tutorials or build videos. I think that I need to go over materials, kind of what I use, and I'll kind of like segment that into like beginner versus more intermediate build styles. Just going over the two. I'm pretty simple when it comes to my materials. I either use carbon or fiberglass for my cores. I don't really use kite spar anymore. I don't really use PVC. Um, Pretty much for longer weapons, I'll use the appropriate thickness of fiberglass up to like band shot pole. And then for like shorter weapons, it's almost always half-inch fiberglass that I have counterweighted to give me the balance point that I want. Makes heavier weapons, but it's cheaper, it's durable, and it lasts long enough. Carbon, I basically had one source for carbon in the entire time that I've been playing, and it's from a guy who lives near me. I think it's either 0.365 solid carbon or 0.435 carbon for longer weapons that go up to like maybe 5.5, 6 feet. That's basically all I use for cars now. I used kite spar when I was a little younger, a little newer. Used a lot of PVC when I was a little younger, a little newer, but they break too often for me. I hit a little too hard. The area that I find is a little rougher, and I want my stuff to be super reliable. So this is kind of the carbon, solid carbon that I've been using. I'm basically out of it, so what I have is what I have. That's pretty much it. Now this is a thick piece of fiberglass, but this is was for like a 7-footer a while back. It's just an end piece, cut it down to 6.5. I get most of my fiberglass from Kent Cove. I bulk order it, so I'll get 10 6-foot pieces of 1/2 inch and a couple pieces of like 3/4. I know 3/4 is thick. Pat it right, make it a long weapon. It is heavy, but it's cheap. You can't beat $5.99 for a core. For like a 6-foot spear, a 6-foot glaive, 7-foot glaive, yeah. And then the like 1/2 inch. Don't get the drilled stuff. Just get the solid like electric fence posts. Now, there's different quality of fiberglass. So like this fiberglass is relatively low quality, so it is probably more flexible after a year or two than some other fiberglass cores. But if I'm making a new sword or somebody asks for a new sword, they're almost always buying a new core. I have a bunch of those cores, and they're $2 for 6 foot or 4-foot length. So it's never really an issue that I've ever had a problem flexing with them flexing out. Now, if you make a 6-foot spear, you're pretty close to flexing out on it. You make a 48-inch red on like 1/2 inch, it'll flex out after a year. So you got to cut it down like 46 and build it up to 48 or 49. But it works. It's relatively cheap. I can bulk order a ton of it. Next, I'll get into foams. So I don't use blue foam anymore for much other than like half padding. It takes damage pretty shittily. Versus like what I use now is like I use a lot of crosslink poly. I order all my crosslink poly from Foam Factory. Really good deal, free shipping after $75. So like for the plastic shield, I ordered like 3/8 inch thickness, 2 pound, 2.2 crosslink poly for the face and the edges of the shield, and then I ordered like 1/4 inch 4-pound crosslink poly for the back side of the shield, and I also use that for my boxes. For my blade foam, for most of my current blades, I bulk order my thicknesses of 1-inch thick, 2.2-pound crosslink poly. I don't have a piece of it right here to show you, but this is like the 3/8 inch. Basically, I just order an inch thick because on my builds, I don't use dab, really. I use carpet tape, and if you do like 3 layers of foam and carpet tape between them, it's not good. It doesn't really work very well for compression. But if you make your box, you do your carpet tape, and then you use custom ordered thicknesses of foam, there's no problem with the compression. So that's kind of how I do that. So I'll do my box. I usually use a little duct tape around my box because I like being able to peel that carpet tape off just to reblade it whenever I want. And then I do my 1-inch thick cross-link poly. Stab tips, I'm using stadium seating. It's pretty much standard for me. It's so easy to get. 1 or 2 of them gives you 20 stab tips. If I'm making a pole arm, I might double up on the stab, just making it nicer. Just depending on what I think it is. Like I said, we fight a little harder in my realm, and the places I go a little closer to where I'm at fight a little harder. Omnis, I don't really build Omnis anymore. Not really. I will if somebody asks for a commission. I will, and if I do, I use this like really nice. I forget what it is. It's almost like a softer version of like shield foam. And I say shield foam. I'm trying to find a good piece of that. So it's like this. I get most of my shield foam from Foam for You. And this is like the 2-inch thick. I think it's 2.3. I think it's 2.3. And it's, you know, like that. Well, that's what this stuff reminds me of. This reminds me of the same kind of shield foam, but it's just softer and it's got a good skin on it. So when you tape it up, it survives a lot longer. I have a little bit of this left, and I really don't make a lot of Omnis very often because a lot of people in my realm take after me and take after a lot of the fighters here, and we use a lot of flat blades. But I do have some in case people commission some, so that's what this is. I don't remember where. I usually get this from vendors at events, or I know somebody who goes to events and they pick some up for me. Gosh, I think maybe I got each one of these for like $6 for like 4-foot length. And it's really, maybe it might even be a little longer than 4-foot length, but that's what I use for Omnis. So like for my Omnis, I'll do a really thin 4-pound box, tape it up, lube it up with some DAP. Let that dry just a little bit, not a long time, because I want to be able to slide it in there, and then slide it up in the core, let that dry for a day, do my stab tip, do my taping, and then I'm good. I'll probably do an Omni build, but way after I do my beginner and more intermediate flat builds. And that kind of leads into like taping. So taping and adhesion. There's a couple different things that I use. So DAP for anything that's not like my stuff or like not a weapon, I'm using DAP for basically everything. Shields, half padding on a lot of stuff if I want it to be super, super light. The problem that I find with DAP is it breaks down over time. It doesn't do well in extreme cold. It doesn't do well in extreme heat. I find that like we have a weird kind of deal going on. In the winters here, it gets just cold enough that it's bad for DAP. And in the summers here, it gets just hot enough where it's bad for DAP. So that's aside from working in an enclosed space. If you have an enclosed space in like an apartment, DAP is basically just a no-go for you. I don't do what I do, and some of my streams you'll see me use DAP inside, and it'll probably cause me problems later in life. I've kind of accepted that because I've done it enough. Now, that's also why I don't use it very often. When I build a shield, like 3 or 4 times a year, then I use it. But like most of my sword builds do not require me to use that. Most of them I use double-sided carpet tape. This brand is Tape Plus off Amazon. I think you can get like 240 yard rolls for like $20, $25. Sounds like a lot, but it saves you from having to use DAP in a closed space, and there's no dry time. So I can go from making a sword in an hour and a half with all the dry time to doing it in 30 minutes if I really haul ass on it. You can do this but that's when I start using my custom ordered thicknesses of foam. If I'm using blue foam or I'm layering all my foam, you can't use this because it will cause issues with compression. The weapon will hit too hard. So then I have to use DAP. But carpet tape is what I use on my more intermediate stuff. Duct tape. Everybody has duct tape. Duct tape's used for everything. I don't use it in the construction of the outer part of the blade, but I do wrap my boxes in it. It does add weight, but I am not a min-max fighter. I am more worried about my weapons lasting longer and having a fail-safe and being safer. My weapons might be slightly heavier, but the chances that a core is going to blow out one of my weapons, not very likely. I've had people using realm weapons that I've made 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, they're not being fought with by like high tier fighters, but they are not blowing out. Where they fail is the foam on the outside becomes soft, not my cores blowing out. Which means also I can just take it apart, pull it off, because carpet tape onto my duct tape just peels right off. Then I can do a new blade. 15 minutes, it's done. 10 minutes, it's done. But I mainly use it on boxes. I use it to secure stuff. So like when I don't have packing tape, we'll get into packing tape's different subject, but when I don't have packing tape for like hafts, I don't like having foam and then athletic tape. I like having foam, duct tape if it's a shorter weapon, one I think is going to have more hands on that haft padding, or foam with packing tape than athletic tape. But if I think there's going to be more contact with the haft padding, I'm going to use duct tape. Then I'm going to use my athletic tape. So there's a couple different kinds of packing tape. I like the thinner stuff. Thinner, lighter weight. So when it comes to tape for this, it's always under something. Like my packing tape's never exposed. It's always under athletic tape. It's never holding something like this. It's compressing something. Or not compressing, but like almost protecting something. It's really a protective layer. It's not compressing anything. But when it's wrapped, I'm not worried about the thinner tape breaking. I'm worried about it protecting. So for me, having the thinner, lighter tape is better. Now, I will compress wrap when it comes to like pommels, which I will show when I do a pommel video. But the thicker stuff, the stuff that almost feels like it's almost as thick as like a sheet of paper, it doesn't work as well because it creates like seams, folds when you wrap it. This does, but since it's thinner, it's easier to hide and it doesn't bunch up as much. So I find the cheaper packing tape is better. Like this is T-Rex ferociously strong tape. It's like Gorilla Tape. This is IPG Intertape Polymer Group. Some off-brand fucking no-name, you know. This is what I like. This stuff's way better. Electric tape. Electric tape I like as a compression over like flat surfaces. So if I'm taping this around a core for some reason and I just need one of them, like maybe, I don't know, flail rings, and I want a constant source of like tension and compression, that's where this is. That's what this is for. I also will sometimes use this for when I do my biscuits to tighten down the tape that goes over the biscuit on the end of the core. Once again, when I do a biscuit video, when I do a core prep video, I'll show you how to do a biscuit and I'll show using this. But a lot of times I won't even use that anymore. I'll use this and then I'll use this to overwrap it, just because this probably tends to be lighter than this. So yeah. Athletic tape is the next one. I just used this Hampton Amazon bulk order. I think I've ordered a box of like 40 rolls of this. Now, not all athletic tape's made equal. Some of it will, like the adhesive will wear through the tape and get your hands sticky. This is the kind that does that. It does, but it's cheaper. Like it's what I can bulk order 40 of them, and I've been using the same box for like a year and a half. This also kind of doesn't have like smooth sides. It kind of has that teeth sides, which I like better because when I use this tape for most of my like half padding cross guards, I'm actually using E6000 over it to stop my tape from rolling. I don't like rolling tape. I think it looks trashy. But what I also found is I don't like plastic dipping weapons. So I can use this, E6000 it down, paint it, and then E6000 it again, and I have a plastic dip-esque looking weapon where it's painted silver. You know, one second, I'll show you. So like you can get the effects of sort of like a shiny, you know, cool painted weapon, which you could do. You could just paint this, but athletic tape doesn't take paint very well. So that's what I use for tapes. I mentioned E6000. It's the only other like adhesive I use other than like DAP and kind of maybe some wood glue, E6000. This is for sealing stuff. It doesn't really dry well, great for like putting on like pommels and stuff, like pre-made pommels. It doesn't really do good for that. But for sealing stuff, great. So I just put up a stream a little while ago doing plastic dipping where I sealed the shield before the plastic dip. So using this on all of the exposed cracks to make sure it's sealed up. That's what this stuff's great for. Um, Making unique covers, because a lot of times when you can't sew a cover, like a weapon has a weird side on it, like the thing above me. You see the shiny bit? That's E6000 over the athletic tape that is holding the fabric on this. This is a Jackal's anime weapon I made a while back that I haven't taken out to practice yet. But like E6000, carpet tape, and then fabric, you can do all kinds of cool covers for weapons that have weird shapes. And that's the main reason I got an E6000. Fabric. I almost, for like super cheap stuff, I'll just go to like the remnant section of Joann's and buy whatever, it doesn't matter. But when I'm doing commissions or I'm doing my personal stuff, I splurge on nicer fabric. There's a section that's sportswear. It's like a sportswear fabric. It has some stretch in it, and it's a little more durable. I don't like ripstop because I found that when ripstop hits armor, yeah, it doesn't rip, but it gets punctures really easy, and it gets cut really easy. It doesn't rip, but it cuts really easy. Now, I fight a lot of people with armor. I'll show you my current sword. To me, I'm more worried about this cover fitting the weapon more than I am, the cover surviving. A lot of times when I fight armor here a lot, I'm going to get nicks in my weapons cover. And that's also why I like that polyfoam. It recovers better from fighting against armor. So there's sportswear fabric, and it's in Joann's in the sports wear section in there. I forget exactly what it's called. Tends to run kind of pricey. It's like 15 to 20 bucks a yard. But I found that's what works best for me and what I do. Let's see. Anything else as far as stuff goes? For plastic dipping stuff, obviously I use a nice mixture of plastic dip and then the thinners that you need. I'll probably go over that more when I do a dedicated plastic dip video. Through the Roof is the best sealant for it after you've plastic dipped and painted. This is really good. I got Leak Seal. This stuff smells really bad, and it peels really badly. So if you're going to do plastic dip and you need sealant, get some Through the Roof. It's way better. Counterweighting. I'm going to be really boring with counterweighting, but I don't know what. I've got a buddy, and we did a trade like 6 years ago, and I got this big-ass spool of soldering wire. I don't even know what gauge soldering wire this is. Is it? Yeah, it's scraped out. But soldering wire is super flexible. So for each inch, around like a half-inch core or inch and a half, I add an ounce or two. So I can wrap this around my core with some adhesive or carpet tape and then tape it over afterwards. And I can counterweight all my weapons. This isn't great for most of you guys out there because I imagine that this whole spool of this really expensive soldering iron wire is probably like, I would guess 150 bucks. What you can do instead is get a thin gauge galvanized steel. You can order that online. You can get that at a Harbor Freight or something, and that'll get you by for counterweighting. And then you can look at bar stock, which is just like steel bars, like measured out, get like ½ inch by a couple millimeters thick. But I like wire because I can be more fine-tuning on my counterweighting. As far as tools, I have this really, really messy tool drawer, and I have a mix of everything in here. But I got fabric scissors. I have finer work scissors, so scissors that I'm going to use on, these are basically my old factory scissors, my old fabric scissors. they're getting a little dirty. But for finer work, I have a sharper set of scissors. And I just recently broke my other scissors, but um, I have another set of scissors for like just being meaty and cutting through just like wire, thin steel, stuff like that. It's a little more of a I don't care about those pair of scissors, so I'm gonna use those. Next, good box cutter and lots of fresh blades. When you start salvaging cores or you start doing finer work, you can use an X-Acto knife, but I prefer getting a bunch of fresh blades. I have tons of fresh blades, so I've got a bunch of them. So, good box cutter, fresh blades. The best thing for cutting foam is a nice serrated steak knife. I've been using serrated steak knives now to make weapons for 9 years, 10 years. It's my favorite thing. Just like how everybody says spreading DAP with blue foam is the best, cutting foam with a steak knife for me is the best. I can be, as accurate as I want with it, and it doesn't get dull. As long as I don't get a whole lot of DAP on it, even if I get a little DAP on it, it's not a big deal. Measuring tape, obviously. I like having some sanding blocks of different different like grittiness, because when you especially with cross-linked poly or foams that have an outer layer, you need to sand that up so that the adhesives you use have a good way of binding to it. And the same thing with like my duct tape. I want to have it be a little rougher so there's something to grab onto, especially if I'm going to dap over duct tape, which I don't do often, but I do sometimes. More E6000, I can't get enough of this stuff. I have it everywhere. A pair of pliers, in case I need it. Leather. So this is obviously not thick enough to do a rope wrap. So getting leather and layering it on the side to make oval shape for your handle and then using rope to wrap it is a good way of making a handle. That's how I do most of my handles. My personal weapons all have hemp wrapped handles because I like how that feels and I've become accustomed to it. But most of the time, paracord or the cheap rope you can get from Harbor Freight or Rural King, those all work. So, but you have to build the handle up first. Some people just like using tape. You can do that however you want to build the handle up. I prefer using leather on either side to build my handles up. This is a thin piece of leather, but yeah, this is more for my armor. I've got a bunch of leather tools, but those aren't really good for making weapons. Let's see, what else I got in here for weapon making specifically. I do like having a sharp knife, not a steak knife, but a sharp knife. That's for when I feel like I need to make larger cuts that a utility knife or box cutter can't make, and for cutting thicker foams that I feel like this just won't work for. Sometimes with shield foam, a steak knife will flex around and you'll get uneven cuts, which this one's pretty even, but sometimes you get uneven cuts, and a sharper knife will avoid some of that. A hammer, I can't think of anything aside from punching holes and stuff where a hammer is useful, but sometimes I like to tap my foam to make sure it's gonna stick together after it's dried. It's a paranoia thing, but I have one. But yeah, and then fabric scissors, stuff to cut fabric. That's pretty much everything. I'm going to probably start making some tutorials soon. I might do the beginner sword build today, if I find all the materials I need for it and get it together. But I'm definitely going to do it sometime in the next couple days. So if you have any questions, just ask. But if you're going to critique me, I'll probably delete it because I don't really do critiquing here. You guys have a good day. Bye.